Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Aaron Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your host, and joined by one of my co-hosts, Kent Hickey. Kent, good to see you.
Good to see you.
And our guest today is a lifelong friend of mine, Ed Jennings. We went to grade school and high school together, and I am proud to say I was the best man in his wedding. So we go way back. So this should be a fun conversation. Ed, welcome to the Next Class.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Good to be with you today. And Kent, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Ed. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, I was looking forward to the conversation.
And for our viewers, our listeners can't see this, but Kent got an amazing haircut just for this podcast today. So, Kent, you're looking great. I was waiting for it to go live.
Yeah, thank you. That was really sincere. I appreciate it.
Alrighty, let's get into this with Ed. So, Ed is the CEO of QuickBase. Ed, before we get into the discussion, tell us a little bit about QuickBase and what you do at QuickBase.
Yeah, so I've been in technology my whole career, selling mostly enterprise software, and QuickBase is we help. It's a work management platform, so we sell to a lot of companies that are building bridges, building big construction companies to big manufacturers, big telecommunications providers, just people, lots of folks in the field, folks driving around in trucks, building fiber optic networks, building buildings, that kind of thing. And a lot of times that's it's hard to manage those, and so they're worrying about, as they say, doing things effectively, efficiently, and keeping people from getting hurt and out of jail. So that's what our software is used for. And so we're owned by a private equity group. We're about 800 or so employees, and it's been a really fun Boston-based company and a great run.
And you have, I know you're traveling globally, offices around the world, or where besides Boston, where else?
Yeah, we're headquartered in Boston, but as you said, we have offices in we bought a little business in Sofia, Bulgaria. We bought a company in California. We also have quite a bit of an operation in India these days. So we're and then also just COVID, like when that hit, we started hiring more and more remotely. So even in North America, we have about 400 people. There's about 250 in Boston. The rest are sort of distributed around the country. So it's pretty distributed company.
Great. Well, we're going to talk today about leadership, and but to begin with, actually, I'd like to talk about one of my epic heroes, your dad. For our listeners, Dr. Jennings was, I think, the first adult that said I could call him by his first name. And he was always Dr. Jennings for 18 years of my life. And when we graduated high school, he said, "Rob, it's Lee." And to this day, I still struggle with calling him Lee. He was the first one, like, no more Dr. Jennings. But we had the chance to see him a few months ago, almost a year ago now, I guess. And he's 97 and sharp as a tack, golfs every Sunday in the winter, mows his own lawn when he's home in Milwaukee for the summer. And I said, what's the story? What's the answer? Like, how do you get to 97 and still golfing every Sunday? And he said he drinks a gallon of milk a week, and he reads voraciously. I was all over their home in Florida. There are books everywhere, and I think I came home with a list of 10 books that he wanted me to read. He's got magazines everywhere. But thinking about your dad and what an influence he had on you, what skills or leadership traits when you look back, you take from your dad?
Yeah, Rob, it's a great question. It's because so many different things. A little bit more context. He grew up in Milwaukee. Grew up in a huge family, and 4 brothers, all fought in the Second World War. He was the youngest. They were, that greatest generation. I think the biggest thing that's most interesting is he was super humble. They were all larger than life. Literally, like Marines, spent their time in the South Pacific, and they came back, and he was just a young boy. He was 17 when he enlisted, never saw combat. Lucky for him, he did his time at the end of the war. And but he always had a humility about him, just because he grew up in you would say, the shadow of these just huge people and huge personalities. And so I think he always was high energy and is high energy. And but humility, I think, was one of the biggest lessons of I think that he shared on us. And again, he would never talk about his experiences, and he's always the first to talk about yours or other people's.
Well, this past time, Ed, was one of the first times we were kind of pulling out of him stories. At 97, he finally was sharing, because you're right, he's always asking me, how's it going? What's going, how's Susie? And,
Yeah.
But this past time, the stories that he was sharing were just remarkable, and it seemed like he was having fun telling them too, though.
Oh, we had a great one. So our one of our boys, so we have three boys and a girl, so a great family. One of them is an ROTC, and my dad came down for his ROTC graduation at Great Lakes Naval last summer, and the two of them got to really get a great picture, and that's the same place where my dad did his naval training, and here he is at that time, 96, with his 20-year-old grandson, and it was like hard not to kind of have a little tear on that one. It was really fun to see that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could meet your dad someday, Ed. He sounds fantastic, and I was struck by the fact that you focus on his humility. It is kind of seemed like whenever folks are interviewed from that generation, that humility really comes about. Don't I mean more so? I don't know why that is. Do you have any sense for that in your dad? Is it innate? Is it the experience? What do you think?
I
So
don't know.
go ahead.
I don't know. He is. There's not a dinner with his. He has 19 grandkids. He has 6 kids. We've had a lot of fortune of health and whatnot in their lives. There's not one where he doesn't literally like express gratitude. And I think he grew up in the Depression. Then he went through the Second World War, and I think there's something that they've seen some tough things, most of that group, and I think they generally feel blessed for the life they've had and the opportunity since then.
I think you're onto something there. I've heard before that if there's only one prayer you can say in the day, thank you, Lord. That might be enough to say it. By the way, speaking of humility, someone who does have humility, I just was thinking, I didn't know you went to grade school with Rob. That's so interesting. I'm reminded of the fact that apparently when Rob was in 3rd grade during choir practice, there was a nun who told him, Rob, I just you can mouth it, but I actually don't want to hear you singing because his singing was that bad. Were you there? I just want to know, were you there when
True
this?
story. Yeah, Ken, true
You were
story.
there. Oh
Sister
my
Evelyn
gosh.
was not a fan of Rob's singing voice. It probably did us all a favor, to be honest.
Wow. So the trauma was real, but well, Rob is very humble about his singing, but apparently with good reason. So anyway, I want to shift over. By the way, I want to thank you, Ed, for that moment, which I'm going to treasure for a long time.
Rob, I'm sorry if there's prejudices against you, but it sounds like you already have the inside scoop.
Oh, trust me, we've got 3 seminars coming up this next 2 weeks. I'm sure this is going to be the highlight of all the seminars.
It's going to be there. So we will do that. But Ed, shifting over from your family to your education, sounds like your family had a huge impact upon you, your values, what you hold dear, and your vision and such. How about on the education side? Tell us a little bit about your education and how did that impact you?
Yeah, for sure. And it's been fun to think about this as I was sort of thinking about joining you guys today. So, little context. So, as you know, St. Eugene started out there, then Market High in Milwaukee, Boston College, undergrad. Eventually went back to Northwestern for an MBA. But I think, and with 4 now adult kids, it's harder to really go all in on liberal arts education. We could, and I think about that. I studied like classic Jesuit education, a lot of philosophy, a lot of theology. I was an English major. I could just lean into those big concepts, and I ate it up. I loved it, and it was such an exciting time. And I remember Rob used to come out. My Aunt Mary was a nun, and she was very well read, and we used to spend time with her talking about big concepts, big ideas, big thinkers. And so that was a big part of it. And I think so many things that have been sort of secularized that I think about what have I aspire to be. I think transparency, humility, integrity. I mean, and building teams that we talk a lot in our culture about building high trust and high performing teams. I mean, I think so many of these are concepts that were grounded in. I still a man for others. I still have so much of what I learned throughout those years is a big part of who I aspire to be. And some days that come through, some days we struggle, but it's the intent every day.
That's great. I mean, and just a quick follow up on that, particularly the comments you made about, and this is a tension point, the liberal arts, right? And so much of education now, because it's so expensive. Do you have to get prepared for the next job? I remember when I was at Seattle Prep. This was a few years ago. One of our best parents was John Stanton, who's one of the early tech people, right, and such. And he gave a talk to our seniors. Well, he went to Whitman College, which is in Walla Walla, small liberal arts school, and I think he was a philosophy major. So he didn't become a tech giant, right, early tech thing by having a tech background. But I think he would say, and he shared it with all of us, including especially the students, was you got to know how to think, guys. You're the questions that are being asked of you right now. They're going to be different in 5 or 10 years in so many different ways. You got to know how to think. So there's a real value to philosophy and such. And could you speak to that a little bit? How does that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about. I mean, so I've only known tech, and tech is constantly changing, and so the industries that you're serving, the technologies that they're using, the business models that you're employing, how you land. I mean, everything. And so, if you're not a lifelong learner, if you're not just an inherently curious human being, you're going to be left behind, because what works today, I guarantee, won't work in 3, for sure, 5 years. And so I think for people who are in that mindset and have that kind of context, it's an exciting industry because it is so dynamic. But it does put the burden of like learning. And we talk a lot about the X factor of people we try to bring in who are first jobs and second jobs. And how do you try to find those who have that curiosity? And because it doesn't matter what role, if they're an engineer writing great software, if they're a salesperson, it's the ones that are just constantly asking and they're trying to understand why and how things, what did it used to be like and where's it going? Those are the people that do amazing things. I mean, in so many different levels. And so, and I do think that's part of a liberal arts education. I think that's part of a learning mindset that you get a lot of grounding in, or I feel fortunate enough to have. I say that though, Ken, because I think one of the challenges is we push kids into very quantitative studies these days.
Right.
We really push math and science, and those are fantastic. Engineering, various forms, and because those are guaranteed jobs, like guaranteed jobs. Liberal arts can be harder for kids to land. Once they land, they can flourish. But I did eventually go back for an MBA. I thought that was a necessary part of the journey for me later on in life. But it's a balance, the big thinking and the pragmatic job thing.
Just one other quick comment about that is when I went to Marquette U, and I lived in a house on 20th and Wells, and I was the liberal arter, and the other 5 were all engineers. And they would bemoan the fact that they had to take theology or philosophy. They would like throw it in my face, or most importantly, writing, right, in the English. And now, of course, when you talk to them now, and I've stayed friends with these guys over the years, they're ecstatic that their education was not purely technical. They love the fact they took some philosophy and some writing. So we have to, in our Catholic schools, while there's this pressure to, I get, we all get it, right? But I think if we give up on that, we're giving up a lot about who we are, right? I mean, and to the detriment of our young people.
Yeah.
Well, and this conversation reminds me of a guest we had a few weeks ago. Dan Porterfield is the CEO of the Aspen Institute, and he's got this book out, Mindset Matters. And it was a fascinating conversation for our listeners that haven't heard it. If this subject that we're talking about right now is of interest to you, go back a couple episodes. Dan Porterfield, CEO of the Aspen Institute, and he talked at it was so often when people talk about the value of college, they quantify it. That if you get a college degree, you can go do this and earn this. Dan never once talked about $1. It was all about the mindset that you get from a liberal arts education that carries you and makes you a better citizen, a better family member, husband, brother. And so it's just, it's great to hear you as CEO of a big company saying the same thing as Dan, who's an academic. And I just found that interesting. You were going, I mean, it was like you were talking exactly like Porterfield.
Well, modern. I mean, he sounds like he's a super complicated.
And John Stanton too. You check out,
for sure.
Anyway,
for sure. So Ed, speaking of leadership, we're not exactly newer to our careers. This gray beard is showing our age. If you were to go back 20 years, what are some things you wish somebody had taught you or shared with you about leadership that's been kind of the school of hard knocks that it's like, wow, somebody would have just told me this. I'm thinking of a young assistant principal who might be listening, or an aspiring teacher who's thinking of going into leadership. What are some lessons that you have that you'd love to share with them?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, probably one of the hardest lessons and when I see a lot of people as they're moving through their career. So not start of their career, but as they're sort of going second to third gear, like they're getting to higher levels of leadership. What got them there usually is they were really strong individual contributors. They were go-getters. They were intelligent. They worked super hard. They stood out from peers. They were always looking for the next project, the next something broken they could try to fix. And that is, I think, that first chunk of a career. That's how one kind of evolves. But then there's this pivot, and it's harder to recognize in yourself. And I struggled, and I had to get through it, where all of a sudden you realize it's not really about you. Like, you reach a threshold of on your own how far you're going to get, that it is ultimately the team that you're surrounded by, the team you either lead or the team you influence, that really sets a higher bar. And when you've spent your whole career trying to make yourself stand out as an individual contributor, as a standout, that's a tough thing to understand and see and go through. And so, we talk a lot about you can lose alone. You never win alone. Like, I really see that here. And it doesn't matter what role you're in. You see people that try to just go all the way on their own, and you see just that there's a ceiling that gets created by that. And so a lot of times it's people stepping into that bigger job. It was when I stepped into a pretty big role, and I was just trying to just run faster, do it better, be the center and a hub and a spoke system, versus really trying to see, how do you build a great team, and how do you realize how they take the whole thing much further? So that I see that again and again, and I had to go through that painful lesson. That was the big one for me, so about halfway through my career.
And what was that first big job where you were trying to do that?
Yeah, it was a startup where I ended up in a sort of a COO type role, and I had it was even more acute because for the first time I was managing functions in engineering, and I didn't know much about. So I was even more dependent on the leaders in those functions to help me understand and how to coordinate their activities, what was going on with sales, what was going on with our marketing teams. And that's when you realize, I realized like I had reached my limit. If I think I'm going to be the best head of engineering while being the best head of sales, while being the best head of marketing, like that, you're not first chair and the violinist anymore. You are the conductor. You don't have an instrument. You're helping others keep time. You're orchestrating what they're doing. You're the only one that's got that perspective. And that is a mind shift, because what got you to that point was something different than what's actually going to propel you, and more importantly, them, to another place.
Interesting.
Wow. Rob, we got to write this one down and use it. You can lose alone. You can never win alone. Is that a kind of a mantra for you? I mean, or did you just come with that now? Or
No. We talk about it on our
okay.
sales team because it's wild. You see it, like, again, it takes a self-confidence and humility both to ask for help, to admit that when things aren't going well, to like reach out. And you see it a lot in sales where they're trying to prove they've got it. I got this. How's it going with the conversation? No problem. I got it. You're like, well, what's the last conversation? Don't worry about it. There's this sense of doing it on their own where you see, and that'll oftentimes end in not a great outcome, where you see others that are like, hey, listen, I could use your help. They reach out to people in different parts of the org. They reach out to their own boss saying like, I'm not sure this is going the way it should. Can I get your input on this? Like, those are the ones that usually get better outcomes. And that's, you're winning together. You're winning with the help of others. You're open, you share that. But I can't tell you how many times you see people on their own, like just go down in a ball of flames because they weren't willing to reach out, ask for help.
We're going to take a brief pause here to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back to the Next Class with Ed Jennings.
Catholic Virtual is a proud sponsor of the Next Class 2.0 and dedicated to supporting Catholic school leaders. Our partner schools turn to us for online teaching solutions that fill teacher openings, expand their catalogs to offer more course choice, and provide options for students an alternative learning experience. Learn more about how we can support you at catholicvirtual.com.
Welcome back to the Next Class with our guest today, Ed Jennings, CEO of QuickBase and Market High alum, Boston College alum, Northwestern alum. But let's stick with that theme you were just talking about, Ed, for a minute, the kind of going it alone, the high performer turning into a leader. We're actually using a book this week at a seminar that Kent and I are leading that I finished for the second time just today preparing for it. And Henry Nouwen, the great Catholic theologian, talks about he was a famous speaker. He's a professor at Harvard. He's, all over, world-renowned speaker. But it wasn't until he went to work with special needs adults at a community, the L'Arche community,
Mm-hmm.
that he really began to find himself. And he talks about, he was sort of, I think as you're describing, he was the superstar. He was doing it all. But it wasn't until he didn't know how to help these people. He needed to ask for help, that he was being led. Kent, I don't know if you want to jump in where I'm going with this.
Well, the humility of being with these people that he saw as being, these are exceptional people just in terms of their kindness and generosity and the level of care they would have. Henry, you weren't at dinner tonight. What was, and feeling somewhat overwhelmed that there can be that much love and support, and so a lot of the individuality, because he would be, your words really resonate with me. There's like too much like, I can do this or I can do that. And it's when the I started to melt away that actually the I emerged more fully, right, in a healthier way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is that in your earlier career, as we all were doing, it was I. You're right. It was, I got to be the best teacher at Market High. I've got to be.
Really, was that a goal, Rob? So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It wasn't going to be a singing career, apparently.
He wanted to be the choir director, and it just didn't work out. But you're right. You want to be and in terms of the classroom, okay, it's the sage on the stage, the star, and there is something to that, and in leadership as well. When you mention those words, like I think, a time that I really struggled with as a school leader was during the pandemic, where for some reason I was getting through my head, I've got to do this. I've got to get through this kind of thing. And then only after I started to realize, wow, I am overwhelmed. This is hard stuff. And asking for God's grace that I trust more, including trust others more. That's the only time it started to work. So yeah, I was well on my way to losing, so anyway, your words really resonate with me. Would you share those with school leaders as well? Like, how does that work with school leaders? And
yeah, I admittedly know my context in the corporate world a little bit, but I do think as a leader, how do you create that environment where people are willing to ask for help, willing to actually offer help to their peers? Because we all know when we're struggling with a certain role or a certain responsibility. We all know when our peers might be struggling a little bit. And how does a leader create that environment where like people can ask each other for help? They can ask themselves and say like, hey, listen, this isn't going well. I could use something here. That I do think is a leader's responsibility. That's an environment that gets created. They see you distributing humility and demonstrating, humility, you asking for their help. And I think that builds on itself. I think about great teams that I've been fortunate to be a part of, either as a participant or as a leader of, and almost always there was this dynamic that over time, you can't snap your fingers. Trust isn't, built overnight. These things take a while, but that people really start helping each other, and you really start willing to admit mistakes publicly. People will start offering suggestions to help people, through tough things. That's a good team, and that's a team that's really on their way to doing some great things.
Vulnerable, right? Admitting, being vulnerable, which is seen as a sign of weakness, is actually, a sign of great strength, right? To be that vulnerability. Let me just follow up with that. We use a little. This is a tension point that I see in education. I'd love to get your perspective on this from your work, because I think it will help us understand in education. So I'm going to use the Jesuit school language, but applies to any one of our Catholic schools. In Jesuit schools, they talk about seek the magis, right? So you're, Boston college guy and Marquette, seek the more, always the more. And the early Jesuits would say, we live with one foot in the air. So it's always striving, always going forward. Okay, great. I think that has a lot to do with the energy of our schools, right? At the same time, there's also a commitment to cura personalis, care for the person, care for the person, care for the person. And there's a tension point between the two, right? Because yes, caring for the person, but we also have these goals as an organization or goals as individuals. And sometimes those collide with each other a little bit. And it's hard, at least I always found it really hard to kind of like, how does that work in these particular situations? Let's say with an employee who's, I do care for you, but you know what? There's some real issues, and having those conversations. So how I could how do you as a leader, how are you compassionate, caring, loving, while also making sure we're striving, guys, we're moving forward. We're going to India. We're going, we're going around the world. So how do you do that?
Yeah, Kent, there's a lot that you're getting at there, and Rob knows and I know he is as well. Maybe you guys all follow. Like, I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni, and really, I like, it might be one of his expressions. He talks about nice versus kind, and sometimes people are very cordial and friendly, and even in a sort of a subordinate kind of role, they'll say nice things and encouragement. But if somebody's failing, the worst thing you can do is keep it a secret. If someone's not living up to expectations, that if you really want them to fail, you don't tell them.
Mm.
But it's hard because we're all taught to be so nice and cordial, especially Midwesterners. You don't sort of, don't act candid, don't be rude, don't be, and that's been something I've had to unlearn. And I don't mean being rude. I just mean maybe kindness is being very clear of when there's an expectation that someone's maybe not meeting, or when there's something that would allow them to move their career or their job or their capabilities further along, but they got to be aware that it's not there yet. I mean, that's really is a gift. Feedback is a gift, especially if it's administered in a sense of like, I want you to believe you can be successful, but you need to know this. This is feedback from your peers. So we do a lot of 360 reviews. We do a lot of not just the annual formal stuff. It's like good parenting. It's in the moment when something's off. Like, could that meeting have gone better? How do you think that went? Like, that kind of feedback, I think is, I think I've gotten to spend more time on this and learn how to do this, and have gotten feedback from my own people. They've benefited from it, and I benefit from it. In this case, now it's a board, and have a couple members in particular that are very strong in their feedback. But it's from the right intent, and it helps me learn and grow. And if people have that mindset of this is constantly ever better, and I'm striving, then that's the kind of thing you need to hear periodically. We all need it.
That's a great answer. That's really good. Thank you for that.
Ed, since we've got you kind of going from that theory to a real practical, Catholic school leaders really are, time is challenging for them. They're just like it is for you, and time management, and they're getting inundated with social media and emails and parent complaints and bored. And how do you prioritize your day? Is something as simple as like, how do you manage your email flow? And then your prioritization of, this employee wants this and this board member wants that. And so if you could just talk for a couple minutes about how you manage as tactically as your email to your time.
Yeah. No, there's a lot on this, especially around, CEO Excellence is an interesting book on this topic. There's another one, Amy Jen Sue writes about the leader you want to be. And it's a topic that I think's been undiscussed for too long, that to be great, like, you have to be at your best. And that means like you're getting some sleep, there's some, like, you're getting whatever it is, exercise, time with family. Like, you have to create that space. Like, you've never been under the gun, under tremendous pressure. You've never had your best ideas when you're barely keeping your head above water. And I had to unlearn that, because similar to like getting rid of the I, there's also this notion that the most successful are the ones that are crazy busiest and always running 1,000 different directions. And sometimes life requires a degree of that, but then you got to regroup. I mean, when you really think about, it's a marathon and you start feeling a blister, you got to stop. You got to take your socks off and change them and make sure it's okay. And then you can keep going. But if you ignore that little blister becomes debilitating. It doesn't take too long between you're going to have to stop running because your foot's not going to let you go any farther. So I do think taking time, making sure that you have time for yourself and making space and for prayer, meditation. I mean, all for exercise, for time with family. I think I don't know who's going to be successful in the long term if they're not making some of that. It feels good that people are more open to it now than they used to be, I think.
This be maybe a question to ask your dad, but my understanding, this is from like reading or watching World War II movies. These guys spent a lot of time making sure their socks were dry. If they didn't take care of their feet, they're going to get trench foot. And it doesn't matter how the rest of your body was working. If you're an infantryman, that's a big deal. So talk to your dad. Ask Lee, what's the story with socks? I have a final question for you on my end anyway. I was just thinking of this. Apparently, this year at our old school, Market High, there was a wonderful speaker. I think I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, John Schlifsky. Okay, if that's correct. But anyway, he's the head of Northwest Mutual, and he was asked to give a talk at the father-son breakfast. Okay, so maybe you'll be invited there next year to give the talk, right, at the father-son breakfast. And as you look back at your work and your commitment to family, these types of things, what are a couple of things that you'd want to say to those Market High boys today, like about about how to live well and such, and how to go forward?
Wow, that's a big one.
Well, my friend Father Marco is the president there, our friend there. So maybe Marco will be giving you a call to ask you to come there next year. So it's good to be thinking about that. You never know. So
But it's good. I don't know. I have to say the people least likely to listen to me are my own sons. So well, it's funny. I do look to my wife as well. We were talking about my dad and his health. I think my mother, who's 10 years younger, is as much a part of his energy and health and all that. And I think so I feel blessed. I think that so much of the lessons that we've shared with our kids have just, we always set out with our kids, around kindness, curiosity, were two of the big ones, and courage. Those are the three things we always aspired for. And, I think it's all those are, I think, unlocks in life, and there are many others, but if we could get those right, we always felt those are going to be important for their lives and their growth. And
well, there's your Jesuit training, always talking threes. So you got your three. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, Ed, we greatly appreciate you joining us on the next class. It's been a great conversation. As I knew it would be, we conclude every podcast with the same question. And this final question is, who is your greatest teacher and why?
Oh, yeah, I would say it was a gentleman that I worked for, and he actually let me go from a company. It was the only time I'd actually lost my job, and it was, I learned more leading up to that, and then the relationship we had that followed, about how, like, to really be pushed, to really explore what's possible, and that back to that kind and nice. No, people have been nice, but for him to really be direct to the point of really challenging me and the point of helping me and then land someplace else. And I've always thought that like, what if we could be that kind to people and that we really help them? We took the time to help them find something new. So that was probably the hardest lesson I went through, Rob, in my career.
Wow.
But the best. And if I look at my career before that point, it was fine. I look at my career after that point, it was a different trajectory.
Wow.
I wish I'd met him sooner, because I think there's a lot of lessons I could have gotten earlier in my career that might have showed up sooner. So I don't know if I would be the one to. Well, he would know that. We've had some great conversations about it since. So
that's a fantastic answer given the context that you gave. And coming out of that difficult experience and to learn, that's amazing. I was about to say that probably the favorite teacher of that third grade class was the choir instructor, because of what she did for them as a class. I mean, Rob, wouldn't you say that was probably the favorite teacher of that third grade class?
Someday on this podcast, I'm just going to start belting out like Gregorian chants for you.
That might be the end of your podcast, Rob.
Take it away, Rob.
Well, I'll leave you this image. We have a great team in Sofia, Bulgaria. So a few months ago, I was over there, and somehow it ended up getting asked, and my voice is no better than Rob's. We were both asked to stop singing, and I had to sing "Sweet Home Alabama" in a basement disco in the middle of Sofia, Bulgaria, to a room full of employees. It's
wow.
They were laughing at me, not with me, at me.
That is a classic.
Is there a video of that, Ed?
God, I hope not. I hope not. But you're never going to see it if there is.
All right, I've got your colleagues' emails. I'm going to be digging for that video. Well, Ed, great to have you on the next class. Really appreciate your answers and the discussion. Really, I think brings a lot of value to our listeners. So
it was thank you for your time. It was an honor to join you guys. Thanks.
Definitely does. Thank
To our
you.
listeners, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's conversation, as always, please like this and share it with your family and friends, and we'll see you at the next class.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in.